Late 1942. Berlin. In a dimly lit office deep within the Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence, a single desk lamp cuts through the gloom. Beneath it, an analyst holds a microdot, a tiny speck of film no bigger than a pinhead. He squints, his breath catching in his throat. The message, pieced together from informants and open sources, paints an impossible picture. A number, a production figure for American heavy bombers. Hundreds per month. Soon, the analyst looks up, his face pale. Around the room, the same disbelief is mirrored on the faces of his colleagues. It can't be true. It's propaganda. It has to be. On the Eastern Front, the Sixth Army is bleeding out at Stalingrad. In the skies over the Reich, Luftwaffe losses are mounting, each downed Messerschmitt a wound Germany can't afford. They need more planes, more tanks, more everything. And now this? This specter from across the Atlantic? America, the land of cars and refrigerators, of jazz and Hollywood fantasies. How could a nation so recently mired in the Great Depression, a nation that hadn't built a truly modern bomber in years, suddenly conjure an airborne armada from thin air? That was the question that haunted them, the question that could decide the war. Their picture of America was fractured, a mosaic of missing pieces. A year earlier, in 41, the FBI had shattered the Duquesne spy ring, their largest network on American soil. Then, just months ago, Operation Pastorius, a mission to sabotage key industrial sites, had imploded in a humiliating failure. Their saboteurs were captured almost as soon as they landed. Now, they were flying blind, forced to rely on scraps diplomatic whispers from neutral Sweden, economic gossip from Switzerland, and meticulous readings of American magazines and newspapers. They were trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing, and the fate of Germany hung on the answer. While Berlin struggled to see clearly, a titanic transformation was shaking America to its foundations. Across the Midwest, the great auto plants, the pride of Detroit, were being stripped bare. Assembly lines that once churned out family sedans were torn out, leaving vast, empty cathedrals of concrete and steel. In their place, something new was rising. Blueprints were unrolled on massive tables, plans not just for a factory, but for a facility the size of a small city. A name, whispered like a rumor among machine tool suppliers and industrial spies, began to circulate. Willow Run. In Berlin, our analyst, let's call him Major Klaus Richter, a composite of the real men who did this job, collated the reports. He cross-referenced shipping manifests from neutral ports with articles from *Life* magazine. He listened to the decoded ramblings of an informant near Detroit's machine tool industry, a man who spoke of lathes and presses being built on a scale never seen before. Richter understood the stakes with chilling clarity. German flak was the best in the world. The Focke-Wulf 190 was a fearsome fighter, but they were finite. If American bombers, these B-24 Liberators, started arriving in numbers that defied all logic, they couldn't be stopped. They would fly faster than flak could be reloaded, in waves too thick for fighters to break. Germany's cities, its oil refineries, its railway junctions, everything would be exposed, laid bare for destruction from 5 miles high. Back in Washington, the directives were clear. The War Production Board had seized control of the economy. President Roosevelt's promise to be the arsenal of democracy was no longer a slogan. It was a mandate. And then there was Henry Ford, the industrial titan, the man who put the world on wheels, had made a stunning vow. He would build the B-24 Liberator, a complex 4-engine bomber with over 1 million parts. Using the same mass production techniques he used for the Model T, he would build one an hour. To the craftsmen of the German aviation industry, who meticulously hand-built each Junkers and Heinkel, the idea was absurd. An aircraft wasn't a car. You couldn't just roll it off an assembly line. It was an intricate, delicate machine of war. The American concept was an industrial heresy. Back in his Berlin office, Richter finishes his report. The numbers don't add up in a linear fashion. The growth isn't steady, it's exponential. He signs his name at the bottom, his hand steady despite the tremor of dread running through him. His report carries a stark warning: American bomber production is not just increasing. It is scaling non-linearly on a curve that German military planning has never picking up where we left off, with the Berlin report sending shockwaves through the Luftwaffe high command, the real hunt for hard numbers began. It became an obsession. The question wasn't if America would build an air force, but how big and how fast. With the FBI systematically dismantling their human intelligence networks inside the United States, German intelligence, the Abwehr, had to get creative. They turned to the global economy, piecing together a mosaic of clues from the periphery. In the bustling telegraph offices of neutral Lisbon, agents paid exorbitant sums for copies of shipping manifests. They weren't looking for military secrets, but for raw materials. How much bauxite was flowing from the Caribbean to American ports? The numbers were staggering. In the quiet, wood-paneled boardrooms of Stockholm, they listened intently as Swedish ball-bearing executives, lubricated with fine brandy, let slip the sheer size of recent U.S. orders. These weren't for cars. They were for aircraft engines and landing gear. In the smoky salons of Bern, neutral bankers, always willing to trade information for the right price, whispered about massive aluminum contracts and the astronomical power output of something called the Tennessee Valley Authority. Power to feed smelters, smelters to make aluminum, aluminum to build bombers. The trail was undeniable. Back in Berlin, analysts plotted these data points on vast maps. They tracked the diversion of machine tools, once destined for Detroit's auto plants, now rerouted to create jigs and fixtures for airframes. They noted the sudden spike in magnesium production, a key component for lightweight engine blocks and incendiary bombs. The picture forming was fragmented, but its scale was terrifying. They were witnessing the industrial equivalent of a tectonic shift, a continent retooling itself for war with terrifying speed. Through fragments of information smuggled out, they tried to gauge the situation on the ground. They heard whispers of a place called Willow Run, a factory so vast it was said to have its own weather system. Early reports were encouragingly chaotic. Stories of mist-drilled holes, of workers freezing in the Michigan winter inside cavernous, unfinished hangars. They scoffed at the idea of women, the so-called Rosie the Riveters, building complex heavy bombers. Surely this was American propaganda. They dismissed the rumors of 3 shifts running around the clock as impossible to sustain. But then the microfilms started arriving. Tiny spools, smuggled in diplomatic pouches from Madrid and Buenos Aires, contained photographs of production graphs. At first, the lines were flat, confirming their initial beliefs about American inefficiency. But then, month by month, the graphs began to kink upwards. A slow bend at first, then a steeper climb, then an almost vertical ascent. The learning curve they had dismissed was real, and it was exponential. The chaos at Willow Run wasn't a sign of failure. It was the messy, violent birth of an industrial behemoth. The Germans knew about the main Consolidated plant in San Diego, of course. They had good intelligence on its output. But then came whispers of a second line in Fort Worth, Texas. Then a third, run by Douglas Aircraft in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And still, the rumors of Ford's Willow Run persisted, the most audacious of them all. The official position in Berlin was that the American Claim 1, completed B-24 Liberator bomber every hour, was pure fantasy. No factory on Earth could achieve such a rate. It was technically, logistically, and humanly impossible. It was a bluff designed to intimidate. But doubt was a creeping poison. What if it wasn't a bluff? What if the Americans, with their seemingly endless resources and their infuriating knack for mass production, could actually pull it off? The scattered economic indicators, the upward shooting production graphs, the multiplicity of assembly lines, it all pointed to a single terrifying conclusion. The tension in the Berlin analysis offices became Berlin, late summer, 1943. A sigh of relief echoes through the corridors of the Reich Air Ministry. The Schweinfurt Regensburg mission, a deep strike by the American 8th Air Force, has ended in a massacre. 60 B-17s, each carrying 10 crewmen, have been torn from the sky. Luftwaffe pilots return with stories of bombers disintegrating under cannon fire, of parachutes blossoming against the backdrop of flame and smoke. In Berlin, the analysts are jubilant. The math seems clear. At this rate, American air power will bleed itself dry over the skies of Germany. The flak cannons, the Messerschmitts, the Focke-Wulfs. The system works. Victory, they conclude, is a matter of simple, brutal attrition. But this relief is dangerously short-lived. Within weeks, the sirens wail again. The condensation trails reappear, not diminished, but thicker, more numerous than before. The bomber streams are back. And this is where the cold, hard numbers on the German analysts' desks begin to turn into a language of pure dread. The Americans aren't just replacing their losses. They are outproducing them at a terrifying rate. This isn't just war. It's a new kind of industrial warfare. a concept taking frightening shape in the minds of a few forward-thinking German officers. Across the Atlantic, a revolution is underway, orchestrated not just by generals, but by statisticians. The U.S. Army Air Force's Office of Statistical Control is tracking everything. They're analyzing sortie rates, loss percentages, and production figures, but they are also discovering something profound: the learning curve effect. Each 1,000th bomber built is cheaper, requires fewer man-hours, and is assembled faster than the one before it. For every German planner, this is a chilling revelation. America isn't just building airplanes. It is industrializing improvement itself. Look at Willow Run. What was once a chaotic Michigan field is now a mile-long assembly building, its production line finally stabilizing. Sub-assemblies for B-24 Liberators wings from one factory. Fuselages from another arrive on rolling jigs, clicking into place with practiced efficiency. At Consolidated in San Diego, output is climbing exponentially. The myth begins to take hold, whispered in awe on the factory floor and in horror in Berlin, a bomber an hour. The reality was nearly as staggering. At its peak, Willow Run was rolling a fully equipped B-24 Liberator off the line every 63 minutes. Imagine the contrast. German factories, decentralized into small workshops to avoid Allied bombs, struggle to maintain production under constant threat. A single bomb on a ball-bearing plant can cripple fighter production for months. Meanwhile, America's industrial heartland beats untouched. A vast, deep supply chain hums with activity. Aluminum, smelted in plants powered by the massive Tennessee Valley Authority dams, flows north. Pratt & Whitney engines, thousands of them, are crated and shipped by rail. Entire freight cars loaded with spruce for mosquito bombers or duralumin sheets for flying fortresses crisscross the continent, a testament to a power that seems almost limitless. Back in Germany, unsettling rumors begin to circulate. Whispers filtered from the post-war memoirs of men like Albert Speer, but felt as a palpable dread in 1943. An aide might mention a translated American news report, a staggering number for monthly aircraft production, only to be dismissed by a superior. Propaganda, the general scoffs. They cannot possibly build so many. But for our German analyst, the one who saw the bomber streams return, the denial rings hollow. He starts to connect the dots, the endless supply of engines, the sheer volume of aluminum, the horrifying logic of the learning curve. He begins to believe the terrible truth. He presents his findings again. He shows the replacement curves, the projected growth of the 8th Air Force. Even with catastrophic losses like those over Schweinfurt, the American fleet doesn't just replenish. It expands. The math is undeniable. The U.S. can suffer losses that would cripple any other air force on the planet and still grow stronger, month by month. His superiors look at the charts, their faces a mixture of disbelief and dawning fear. They are not fighting an army. They are fighting a factory. A factory that covers a continent. And as the drone of another 1,000-bomber raid begins to form in the distant skies, the most terrifying calculation of all settles in. America isn't just coming to win the war. It's coming to bury them under a mountain of steel. Early 1944. The sky over Germany is no longer empty. It's a calendar of destruction, marked by silver glints and white contrails. The year began with a brutal crescendo known as Big Week, a relentless 6-day assault on the German aircraft industry. The objective was clear: break the back of the Luftwaffe. But something else was happening, something more fundamental than a single, devastating campaign. The bomber stream was becoming as predictable as a weather pattern. Every day the sun would rise, and with it, the droning hum of thousands of engines. For German intelligence analysts, the trickle of information they had once prized was now a terrifying flood. It was an avalanche of data that buried hope. A Swiss newspaper, reporting with neutral detachment, names a new aircraft factory near Omaha, Nebraska. Whispers from informants in neutral ports speak of round-the-clock shifts, not just in Detroit, but in places they'd never heard of, like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Fort Worth, Texas, places that weren't supposed to matter. One analyst, hunched over his desk in a dimly lit Berlin office, unrolls a captured American maintenance manual. It's for a B-17G. He stares not at the schematics, but at the logistics appendix. The list of spare parts, the recommended inventory levels for a single airbase in England, it reads like pure fantasy. He compares it to the frantic requests from German maintenance depots, struggling to keep a few dozen fighters airworthy with scavenged parts. The American numbers are not just larger. They belong to a different reality, a world of impossible abundance. The analyst begins to draft a memo. He hesitates on the title, then writes with a grim sense of finality, Die Bomber Lawine, the bomber avalanche. His core argument is radical, almost heretical. He argues that the decisive weapon isn't a new bomb site or a clever tactic. It's America's sheer, overwhelming capacity to build. It's the factory floor, not the battlefield, that has already decided the air war. He presents his findings at a briefing. The Luftwaffe officers, their faces etched with fatigue and denial, are dismissive. They counter with reports of their own. The new jet fighters, the Me-262s, are miracle weapons that can slice through bomber formations. They talk of vast underground factories, safe from the Allied bombs, that will soon churn out fighters by the thousands. They cling to the idea that German ingenuity can still outmatch American brute force. Their losses are unsustainable. One major insists, pointing to Allied casualty figures. The analyst tries to explain that the numbers are meaningless if the replacements arrive faster than the losses. His memo is filed away, labeled defeatist, but the reality of the avalanche is undeniable. On the ground, anti-aircraft crews no longer scan a clear sky for a few specks. They stare up at a vast knitted tapestry of contrails stretching from horizon to horizon, a ceiling of doom that blots out the sun. In the railway marshalling yards, clerks frantically try to reroute coal shipments. The hydrogenation plants, which turn coal into synthetic fuel, are starving. The bombers are not just hitting factories. They are severing the arteries of the entire war economy. A Luftwaffe quartermaster sits at his desk, flipping through pages of parts requisitions. Stacks of them. Engine components, landing gear struts, cockpit canopies. None of them will ever arrive. The factories that were supposed to make them are now just coordinates on an Allied bombing map. And then, subtle hints of something even more terrifying begin to emerge. Clippings from international newswires mention a new type of American bomber, operating from distant, almost mythical-sounding bases in China and the Mariana Islands. They call it the Superfortress. The reports are sketchy, but the details are chilling. It's said to be larger, faster, and fly higher than anything they've ever seen, in a pressurized cabin above the reach of their flak. The implication is staggering. While Germany was struggling to counter the first wave, America had already built a second hammer, bigger and heavier than the first, and it was already starting to fall in another part of the world. One evening, through a contact in neutral Sweden, the analyst finally gets what he has been desperately seeking, a verified table of U.S. heavy bomber production figures. He smooths the paper out under his desk lamp, his heart pounding. The columns of numbers swim before his eyes. B-17 flying for 1944. The sky over Germany darkens, not with clouds, but with aluminum. The Allied oil campaign begins, a relentless systematic demolition of the Third Reich's lifeblood. Luna, Plitz, the sprawling synthetic fuel plants, one by one, they are erased from the map. The rail lines that carry the fuel are severed. On airfields across the Reich, revolutionary jet fighters, the Me-262s, sit silent, starved of fuel. Their potential neutralized not in dogfights, but by spreadsheets and production targets set thousands of miles away. For our analyst, this is the moment of terrible, awe-inspiring clarity. He walks through the skeletal ruins of a bombed-out oil refinery, the air thick with the ghosts of industry. He thinks back to that first microdot, that initial, almost unbelievable report on American production capacity. He had doubted it. Now, seeing the twisted metal and shattered concrete, he understands. The decisive front wasn't just in the skies or on the battlefields. It was on the factory floors he never saw. The numbers themselves were a weapon. In 1944 alone, the United States produced over 96,000 aircraft. German intelligence, once so confident, was simply stunned by the final tallies. Nearly 13,000 B-17 flying fortresses. Over 18,000 B-24 Liberators. Almost 4,000 of the brand new B-29 Superfortresses. This wasn't magic. It was a symphony of production. 4 separate B-24 assembly lines, operated by giants like Ford, Consolidated, and Douglas, were synchronized to a single, relentless tempo. And at the heart of this industrial storm was Willow Run. The facility was never perfect, never effortless. It was a complex, messy human endeavor. But at its peak, it was delivering a fully equipped B-24 Liberator roughly every 60 minutes. A 4-engine heavy bomber rolling off the line every hour, around the clock. It was an industrial rhythm that Germany, crippled by bombs and its own inefficient systems, could never hope to match. This was a war of systems, of logistics, of scale. A workforce of men and women, many of whom had never held a rivet gun before, learned and adapted, getting faster and more efficient month by month. In the final days, the analyst writes his last memo. It reads less like a report and more like a confession. "We miscalculated," he writes. "We underestimated their concept of time. We underestimated their industrial will. But most of all, we failed to comprehend their systems. They had planned for a short, sharp war. They were confronted by an opponent who could build, rebuild, and innovate at a speed that defied belief. After the war, the newsreels show a different scene. The once thundering assembly lines fall silent. The vast hangars at Willow Run stand empty, echoing with the memory of what they achieved. The war was won by soldiers, pilots, and sailors, yes. But it was also decided by engineers, by riveters, by the managers who organized the chaos, and by the analysts who first glimpsed the terrifying truth in the numbers. The enduring lesson is profound. Speed, when applied at an